you are closer to your dreams. So, with this note, I, Dr. Meenal Joshi, welcome you all to National Webinar on Radio Pharmaceuticals for Diagnosis and Therapy, organized by Indian Society of Analytical Scientists, headquarters and Nagpur chapter, along with Chemistry Department of Sri Ramdev Baba College of Engineering and Management. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Avinash Bharti, Chairman ISS Nagpur chapter, to welcome August gathering. So please.
Thank you, Meenal. It's my humble request. Every time I am doing the same, please mute yourself. Everyone, please check that your mic should be muted. Okay, thank you. Now, it's again another topic which we have the webinar today. Now, first of all, I welcome all of you in this webinar. Now, this webinar is again organized by ISS headquarter, Nagpur chapter, along with Chemistry Department, Ramdev Baba College of Engineering and Management, Nagpur. Today's topic is radiopharmaceuticals for diagnosis and therapy. For this, we have with us Dr. Nilima Rajurkar. She is a former professor and head of Department of Chemistry and former head Department of Environmental Science at Savitribai Phule, Pune University, Pune. Madam has lot of experience in the different fields. I will not read all the biodata, but here she has expertise in diffusion in aqueous solutions, nuclear and radiochemistry, medicinal plants, environmental pollution, wastewater treatment, and Ayurveda like bhasmas. And therefore, the today's topic is also very much relevant to her research area. And therefore, I welcome you, madam. Again, I welcome today's chief guest, Dr. M.R.A. Pillai, who is a former head radio pharmaceutical division, BAR. He also worked as an International Atomic Energy Agency, Austria, as technical officer, and presently working as group director at the Molecular Group of Companies, Kerala, since 2014. Sir also has vast experience in radiopharmaceutical chemistry, and therefore both today's speaker and the chief guest is from the same field. I welcome you, sir. I welcome all the participants here. Then I welcome our president, headquarter, ISS, Dr. Chandrachud, Vice President, Dr. Raghav Saran, and he is also the advisor of Nagpur chapter ISS. Then I welcome Dr. Rajiv Raghavan, Chairman, Webinar Committee. Then Dr. Vijay Tangde, Dr. Himani Pandurnikar, Dr. Mrityunjay Karmakar, and all other dignitaries on the platform. So today we will now start the webinar. Over to Meenal.
Thank you, sir. Jyoti of Diya represents Agni. The lighting of lamp removes darkness, ignorance, unhappiness, spreading of almighty grace and divine energy in the surrounding. So I invite all dignitaries and participants for virtual lighting of lamp.
सतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्युर्मामृतं गमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
The flame of light goes in upward direction, which signifies one should obtain knowledge in the way that uplifts oneself to higher deeds. So I pray Almighty God to grace this occasion with His blessing. Now, moving towards the start of webinar, I would like to invite Dr. Raghav Saran sir, Vice President, ISS Headquarter and Advisor, Nagpur Chapter for opening remarks. So please.
Honorable President, ISS, Dr. Chanchuran, Dr. Rajiv, Chairman, Webinar Committee, Dr. Nair, Dr. Adya, Dr. Bharti, distinguished luminaries, friends, and my dear participants. A very good evening and welcome to you all in our knowledge sharing program. Friends, common populace is not very receptive to radiations, especially radioactive radiations. A fear psychosis was developed in human subconscious due to radiational hazards Japan had to face after the atom bomb was dropped. Excessive exposure, no doubt, to radioactive radiations is beyond doubt harmful as excess of anything else. The degree of harm obviously depends on the excess of exposure. Radiation too harms only beyond the tolerance level. Otherwise, within prescribed dosages, they are of great utility in multiple fields as tracers in non-destructive tests of materials, alloy structures, detection of leakage in gas pipelines, increasing shelf life of perishable food items like mangoes, onions, potato, genetically modified seeds, large-scale sterilization of surgical equipments, disease like cancer, thyroid, detection of gouts, etc. Friends, today we have an unique opportunity of being exposed to two scientists of highest caliber on radiopharmaceutical. Our chief guest, Dr. M.R.A. Pillai, former head Radiopharmaceutical Division, BRC, BSc from Institute of Chemistry and Technology, Poland, Nuclear Chemistry and Technology, Poland, a scientist of international repute, who had enlightened us by his talk in our previous webinar series of 2020. He is very active and actively associated, and he is editor of, even now, Carrier Biotechnology and Radiopharmaceuticals, and member of editorial boards in 7 other journals. Welcome you, sir. Today, among us, we have our eminent speaker, Dr. Rajurkar, adjudged as leading scientist in nuclear chemistry and awarded as Best Women Scientist by Indian Council of Chemists, former VP of IANCAS, who has written a book itself on radiopharmaceuticals, diagnosis and therapy, almost an authority in the field. Welcome you, ma'am. So friends, let us utilize this great opportunity and derive the benefit of the talk. Thank you. Meenal, hand over to Meenal.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for giving brief background of today's webinar. Now, I would like to request Dr. Rajiv Raghavan, sir, Chairman, Webinar Committee, to address the August gathering. Sir, please.
Thank you. Dr. P.P. Chandrajudan, President ISAS, Dr. M.R.A. Pillai, former head of Radio Pharmaceutical Division, BARC, and Group Director, Molecular Group of Companies, and our today's chief guest, and Dr. Nilima Rajurkar, former professor and HOD of Chemistry and Environmental Science, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. Dr. Avinash Bharati, Chairman, ISAS Nagpur Chapter, Dr. Raghav Charan, Dr. B.R. Nair, distinguished audience, ISAS members, friends, a very good evening. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude towards ISAS Nagpur Chapter, especially Dr. Raghav Charan and Dr. Avinash Bharati for coordinating this week ISAS webinar with Dr. Nilima Rajurkar as the speaker on radio pharmaceuticals on diagnosis and therapy, and Dr. M.R.A. Pillai as the chief guest, the most appropriate person to inaugurate this webinar. Radio pharmaceuticals are mainly used in medicines for getting anatomical and physiological information about organs and the diagnostics and therapeutic applications. They are one of the precious tools developed by modern science, and the method is unique with several advantages over the conventional clinical diagnostic methods. Even though they have several advantages, but due to the source of radiation, it has also some disadvantages is there. I hope that today's talk by Professor Nilima Rajurkar will enlighten us in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Chandrachuran, sir, President, ISAS Headquarters, for presidential address.
Good evening to everybody. Dear Dr. M.R.A. Pillai, our chief guest today, Dr. Nilima S. Rajurkar, our expert speaker this evening, my esteemed professional colleagues in the ISAS Executive Committee, chairman of the various chapters of ISAS, and very esteemed audience. We at ISAS are very happy to have an international level expert like Dr. M.R.A. Pillai as our chief guest today. Dr. Pillai is a leading world-level scientist and authority in radiopharmaceuticals and its applications, who is contributing towards Atmanirbharta in this important area of diagnosis and treatment, benefiting to alleviate human sufferings. Thank you, Dr. Pillai, for joining us as our chief guest today. The radiopharmaceuticals for diagnosis and treatment of diseases is a very prominent contribution of the Indian Atomic Energy Program to benefit the common man. Generation of a wide network of experts and specialized manpower is essential to carry on with these techniques. And it is in this respect that Dr. Nilima Rajurkar, today's speaker, occupies a very important position in this scenario. I am happy to note that Dr. Nilima Rajurkar had done extensive work associated with radiopharmaceutical in terms of R&D, and I look forward keenly to listen to her talk. Let me take this opportunity to thank Dr. Raghav Charan and Dr. Rajiv Raghavan, and also the management of Ramdev Baba College of Engineering and Management for organizing such a purposeful webinar on the ISAS platform. So I hand over back to Dr. Meenal Joshi. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Himani Pandurnikar, Assistant Professor, Chemistry Department, Sindhu Mahavidyalaya, Nagpur, for introduction of our today's chief guest, Dr. M.R.A. Pillai, ma'am. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving me this such opportunity. A very good evening to one and all present in the webinar. I initially would like to welcome today's chief guest, Dr. M.R.A. Pillai sir, in this national webinar on the topic Radiopharmaceutical for Diagnosis and Therapy by an eminent speaker and renowned academician, Dr. Nilima Rajurkar, ma'am. It is my great privilege and honor to brief you about the journey of life and achievements of dynamic and very distinguished personality having with us today Dr. M.R.A. Pillai sir as the chief guest of today's webinar. Dr. Pillai joined Baba Atomic Research Center Training School in 1975 after completing his graduation in chemistry from the Fatima Mata National College, Kollam, Kerala. Sir did his MSc and PhD from the University of Bombay in 1986. He worked at the University of Missouri, Columbia, USA as a postdoctoral research associate during 1987-89. He remained associated with the university as a visiting assistant professor in 1992 and then as a visiting professor in 1994. He worked at the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, Australia as technical officer during 2003 to 2010. Dr. Pillai also the recipient of highly prestigious Doctor of Science DSc degree from the Institute of Nuclear Chemistry and Technology, Poland in 2011. Sir got retired as head of Radiopharmaceutical Division, Bhabha Atomic Research Center in 2013. Sir is presently working as a group director at the Molecular Group of Companies, Kerala, India since 2014. Molecular Group has set up the only medical cyclotron operational in Kerala and supplying radiopharmaceuticals for PET-CT imaging. The group also operates 2 nuclear medicine departments in Kerala. To quote some award here, he is a recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Association of Nuclear Medicine Physician ANMPI for his contribution in nuclear medicine. He has also received 6 awards, including the Distinguished Service Award during his 7-year tenure at the IAEA, Australia. Besides this, Dr. Pillai also extended his services for the promotion of research in the young generation as research guide for MSc and PhD in the University of Mumbai and Homi Bhabha National Institute. Dr. Pillai published more than 200 papers and has 2 US patents to his credit. He wrote 3 books and edited 14 books published by the International Atomic Energy Agency. He has over 4,900 citations in Google Scholar, an H-index of 37 and iTunes index of 110. His academia website has over 52,000 views and is followed by 1,376 scientists. He is the associate editor of Cancer Biotherapy and Radiopharmaceutical and is an editorial board member in 7 other journals, including European Journal of Nuclear Medicine and Molecular Imaging Chemistry and Radiopharmacy, American Journal of Nuclear Medicine and Molecular Imaging and Current Radiopharmaceuticals. Dr. Pillai visited 55 countries during his professional life. I would like to mention here that there is a very long list of achievements of Pillai sir. So purposefully, I read out only few of them from the list. I seek apology if I forgot something from this exhaustive list of achievement. It would be a great privilege to hear you, sir. Thank you, sir. Now I would hand over session to Meenal ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am, for brief introduction of our chief guest. Now, I would like to invite our chief guest, Dr. M.R.A. Pillai, former head, Radio Analytical Division, BARC, to address August gathering and also to inaugurate today's webinar. So, please.
Thank you. Dr. Chandrajudan, National President of Indian Society of Analytical Scientists, Dr. Raghav Saran, Dr. Rajiv Raghavan, Dr. Avinash Bharati, Dr. Nair, Dr. Ajurkar, and all other dignitaries present in today's webinar. A very good evening to all of you. Thank you, Himani, for that wonderful words of introduction. It was very, very elaborate. Thank you very much for collecting it and giving it to the audience. My good evening to all the participants of today's webinar. I am indeed happy that the ESAS has decided to call me for this seminar on radiopharmaceuticals to be given by Dr. Nilima Rajurkar, who is a good friend of mine for several years. It is also an opportunity to see so many of my friends who are sitting in the sitting in front of the camera, including Adya and others. So it's a very nice occasion for all of us. The Indian Society of Analytical Chemists had been doing a wonderful job by organizing these webinars in this time of COVID. And all these seminars are very nicely organized, very well conducted, and well attended. And I also seen that most of these seminars are well utilized by students who are using and seeing these webinars in the YouTube. Most of the topics which are taken and selected for these webinars are very socially relevant. But today's seminar is very special for me, because I had been working in the field of radiopharmaceuticals for nearly, I don't know, maybe 45 or 50 years. So it had been my bread and butter, it had been my life. And the second thing is that it is going to be given by a good friend of mine who was from the Pune University. She had been examiner for some of my students, so it's a very long association. I had been meeting her in many occasions and many conferences. As you know, nuclear medicine or radiopharmaceutical is one of the very important societal applications of radioisotopes, because these radiopharmaceuticals are used in the faculty of nuclear medicine, both for diagnosis, because the diseases can be diagnosed much earlier by nuclear medicine as compared to any other technique, any other imaging technique. If you look at MRI, or if you look at CT or ultrasound, all those modalities will be useful only when the disease has sort of matured. Whereas in nuclear medicine, we can detect the disease much earlier. And of course, the key important thing for nuclear medicine is the radiopharmaceuticals. Radiopharmaceuticals is actually a multidisciplinary work, which a lot of chemistry is involved, a lot of biology is involved, and a lot of nuclear medicine is involved. So it's a intersection between chemistry, biology, and medicine. And of course, radiochemistry plays the major part of it. Now, I will not be getting into the details of the radiopharmaceuticals or anything, because today we have a very eminent speaker, Dr. Nilima Rajurkar. I'm sure she will be giving the details about the radiopharmaceuticals, the principle, how it works, and maybe some of the typical examples. And I am very keenly looking forward to listening to her seminar. I'm extremely pleased that the ESAS decided to call me as a chief guest of today's webinar series. And all of you had given wonderful words about me. I am indeed thank you for all those nice words. So with this few words, I will like to inaugurate this today's seminar by Dr. Nilima Rajurkar, and the floor is open to the organizers. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Vijay Tangde, Assistant Professor, Postgraduate Teaching Department of Chemistry, to introduce our today's resource person, Dr. Mrs. Nilima Rajurkar, former Professor and Head, Chemistry Department, Savitribai Phule University, Pune. Sir, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Minal. Good evening to all. President of ISAS, Vice President, Chief Guest Pillai sir, today's speaker, Professor Mrs. Nilima Rajurkar Madam, Bharti sir, respected dignitaries, colleagues and friends. It is indeed my honor and privilege to read out the biodata of Rajurkar Madam. She is indeed a role model to many of us. Professor Dr. Mrs. Nilima Rajurkar, she has earlier headed one of the prestigious institute of our nation, that is Department of Chemistry of Savitribai Phule, Pune University, Pune. She has got a huge experience of more than 39 years. She has also headed the Department of Environmental Science at Savitribai Phule, Pune University, Pune. She is a fellow of Maharashtra Academy of Science and has been working in multidisciplinary area such as nuclear and radiation chemistry, electrochemistry, neutron activation analysis, environmental pollution, wastewater treatment, medicinal plant chemistry, synthesis of Ayurvedic bhasma, radiopharmaceuticals, public health, and many more. Through her career, she has guided 45 research students for PhD and MPhil degree, and she has got more than 200 publications to her credit. She has acted as editor of International Journal of Clean Soil, Air and Water of Wiley Blackwell, and also as a peer team member of NAC. International Biographical Research Center at Cambridge, UK has listed her among the leading scientists in nuclear chemistry in 2009, and Indian Council of Chemists conferred her with the Professor Kaza Somashekara Rao Award with the Best Woman Scientist in Chemistry in 2014. She has also written a book on nuclear chemistry through problems with Professor H.J. Arnikar, and she is also a co-author of a book on science and technology for competitive exam students. She was involved in preparing a series of video films on radioactivity and lecture series on environmental science for UGC countrywide classroom. She visited several countries for invited talks and conferences. She was the Vice President of Indian Association of Nuclear Chemists and Allied Scientists and convener, Indian Women Scientist Association, Pune branch. Presently, she is working as Vice President of Marathi Vignan Parishad Pune Vibhag. She is a member of number of scientific societies. She is actively involved in science popularization program, and as a part of it, she has recently written a book on radiopharmaceuticals, diagnosis and therapy in Marathi. So friends, today we are really going to have a feast. Now I hand over the session to Dr. Minal again for listening to Dr. Nilima Rajurkar. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, sir. And now, without further delay, I would request Dr. Rajurkar to deliver her talk. Ma'am, please.
Okay.
And there is one announcement for participants. So the participants are requested to write their questions in a chat box, as we are having a question answer session after ma'am's talk. Thank you. Ma'am, please
Yes, sure.
start your talk.
Yes. Can you see the slides?
No, ma'am.
No?
Not it.
Okay. Can you see now?
No, madam.
No.
We are just able to see your face.
1 minute, I'm doing it. Just wait. What happened? Share. Still not?
It's
Yeah, it's
visible
coming
now.
now.
Huh?
It's coming now.
Coming.
We're able to see. Yes.
Slides are moving?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. First of all, good evening to all the respected dignitaries and the participants who have joined today's webinar. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Saran, Dr. Chandrachudan, and all EC members of ISAS for inviting me for today's webinar. And I really feel very honored to present today's webinar in front of the authority in the field of radiopharmaceuticals, Dr. Pillai sir. Dr. Pillai sir, thanks for chairing today's session.
Welcome, madam.
Okay. So today I'm going to talk about the radiopharmaceuticals for diagnosis and therapy. So whenever the term radioactivity is heard, everybody is very much afraid because they always remember the Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Chernobyl accidents. That is all a destructive side. But there are numerous peaceful applications of radioactivity. And in my various lectures, I always try to put up this positive side of radioactivity. So today we will see about the radiopharmaceuticals. So in the beginning, we'll see some historical background of radioactivity. Then we'll see how the radioisotopes are produced. Then the units which are used for measuring radiations. Then we'll come to nuclear medicines, wherein radiopharmaceuticals are used. We'll see the general principles. Then the radionuclide generator, which are the radiopharmaceutical tracers used. Then we'll see some examples of in vivo and in vitro diagnosis. Then at the end, about the radiation therapy. And in short, I will discuss about the designing of iodine-125 brachytherapy source, which was designed at Radiopharmaceutical Division of BRS. So all of you know, on 8th November 1895, Röntgen discovered X-ray, and just 114 days after that, Becquerel discovered the radioactivity. But at that time, it was known as Becquerel rays. These are the Curies which gave the name or coined the name as radioactivity, who invented in July 1898 polonium and in 1898 December radium. So all of them, they won the Nobel Prizes. Röntgen in 1910, Becquerel and Curies combined in 1903. And there were 12 more Nobel Prizes in the field of radioactivity. George Havasse in 1913, the tagging of radioisotope, first time he has done. Then cyclotron was invented by Ernest Lawrence in 1930. Artificial radioactivity was discovered by Frederick and Irene Joliot-Curie. It is son-in-law and daughter of Curies. The nuclear fission by Otto Hahn and Strassmann. And nuclear reactor by Fermi and co-workers. Let us see how these radioisotopes are synthesized. There are different ways. First is the bombardment with the neutrons. So here example I have given is manganese 55 undergoes N-gamma reaction producing manganese 56 with a half-life period of 2.58 hours. These are the thermal neutrons having the energy of about 0.1 electron volt. Then second mode is the bombardment with the charged particles. That is deuterons here given, magnesium 24 resulting into sodium 22. And you can see the difference. Here the energy required is 8.5 MeV, that is million electron volt. So neutrons 0.1 electron volt, and this is 8.5 MeV. This is because these are the charged particles. The third way is the decay of radioisotope itself. The tellurium-131, which is produced by N-gamma reaction of 130 tellurium, gets decayed into iodine-131, having half-life of 8.4 days. So we'll see how the number of radioisotopes increasing. In 1937, there were 200 radioisotopes, 44 become 450, then 650, 1300, and today more than 2000 radioisotopes are known and are used. Now let us see some important units which are used in this field of radioactivity. One is the Curie. It is the 1 Curie is equal to 3.7 into 10 raised to 10 disintegrations per second. So this unit is used for quite a long time, but nowadays Becquerel, which is the SI unit of this, it is because Curie was the unit because they had done a lot of work on radioactivity, as all of you know. But Becquerel, who discovered it, nowadays Becquerel is the unit which is equal to 1 disintegration per second. Then these are the various units developed by chemists, biologists, and physicists. These two are developed by chemists. So rad, 1 rad is nothing but absorption of 100 oaks per gram of a substance. Gray is the SI unit of rad, and 1 gray is equal to 100 rads. Roentgen was introduced by physicists. It is nothing but absorption of such a dose that would produce in 1 cc of dry air 1 ESU of electricity of either sign, that is either positive or negative. Then biologists they introduce relative biological effectiveness, that is RBE. So here, how these radioactivity, that is alpha, beta, gamma, are interacting with the biological cells, they are numbered. That is a quantifying factor, it is called as, depending on their extent of interaction with the biological cell. So it is 1 for X-ray and gamma rays, 2.5 for thermal neutrons, and 10 for alpha particles, fast neutrons, and protons. Then comes the Roentgen equivalent mammal. It is equal to RBE, that is quantifying factor, multiplied by rad. And sievert is the SI unit of ray, it is RBE into gray. So I purposely explained all this because this will come in some of the slides further. Now, largest number of uses are in the medical field. So they are used for diagnostic purposes, therapeutic purposes, as well as for sterilization. So when it is used for diagnostic purposes, generally low dose is used and exposure is also for short time. When it is for therapeutic purposes, generally high dose is given and exposure varies from short to long time. And of course, for sterilization of various medical tools and all, this is used. Let us first see about the diagnostic uses. X-ray radiations are used for radiographs, fluoroscopy, and CT scan, and nuclear medicines wherein radiopharmaceuticals are used. Now, many times the people has to take the X-ray, and whenever somebody says, oh, it is X-ray, they are scared of it because it is a radioactive. So in order to explain that how much dose we are getting exposed to it, I have given some data here. Whenever X-ray radiographs are taken, it is for very short time interval. It is less than a second. Those who have undergone the X-ray, you must have seen that it is okay, take a breath and oh, finished. Immediately your X-ray is produced. So it is very less time is there. Then low doses for dental X-ray 8 to 10 millirem, chest X-ray 6 to 10 millirem, mammogram 30 to 50 millirem. If it is a hip, it is 40 to 80 millirem. When X-ray fluoroscopy is used, there is a long time exposures. It varies from a minute or even more than that. It is a higher dose is given. When the barium enema is given, it is 600 to 900 millirem. And for upper gastrointestinal, it is 350 to 550 millirem. Then CT scan. So there is series of short exposures at different angles are given, and then it is analyzed on the computer and displayed. The speciality of this, it gives the cross-sectional view of the anatomy. Then medium dose, whenever it is given to the head, it is about 200 to 300 millirem. For body, it is 300 to 400 millirem. Okay, now let us come to the nuclear medicine. So it is a special branch of medicine, the origin of which lies in the discovery of X-ray and artificial radioactivity. Let us see how it progressed. In 1946, radioiodine was used to treat the thyroid cancer. Because of these, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki incidences, many of them, they are exposed to iodine and they are having thyroiditis. Again, this radioiodine is again used to treat the thyroid cancer. I will deal with it afterwards. Then in the decade of 1950s, use of nuclear medicines was started at a larger scale. And in 60s, it was recognized as a special branch. And in the decade of 1970s, use of nuclear medicines to study other organs was also started. And 1980s, first time nuclear medicines were used to study the heart diseases. Let us see how it progressed in India. So Dr. Homi Bhabha played a very important role starting nuclear medicine branch in India. In 1960, a research grant was made available at the Department of Atomic Energy, and in 1963, the Radiation Medicine Center was started at Tata Memorial Hospital. Ernest Lawrence, who is a Nobel laureate, and he was a very good friend of Dr. Bhabha, he provided many equipments to start this branch. Bhabha Atomic Research Center and BRIT, that is Board of Research in Isotope Technology, both these played a very major role in the progress of nuclear medicine branch in India. There are 349 nuclear medicine centers in India, which are approved by Atomic Energy Regulatory Board. So out of these 349, 49 are in Maharashtra, and out of that, 9 are in Pune. Let us start with the subject now. So radiopharmaceuticals. It is nothing but a radioactive compound which is used in nuclear medicine for the diagnosis and therapeutic treatment of various human diseases. The specialty of radiopharmaceutical is that it gives both anatomical as well as physiological information of the organ and how it is designed. So its designing is based on the preferential localization of it in a given organ or its participation in the physiological function of the organ. For example, if you want to study the thyroid, the iodine, whatever we take, it preferentially goes to thyroid gland. So it is a critical organ for the iodine. Like that for other organs also. Let us see general principle for the use of radiopharmaceuticals. So this radiopharmaceutical provides a very important information about the disease which could not be obtained in any other way. You can use only radiopharmaceuticals to know much more in details about it. Second important thing is that we have to always consider risk to benefit ratio. And this risk to benefit ratio decides the dosage of that radiopharmaceutical. As all of you know, radioactivity is harmful to mankind. That means there is a risk. But somebody is having cancer and he wants to take the radiation therapy, it will be beneficial to that person. So you have to consider what is the risk to benefit ratio, and depending on that you have to take the dosage, and this is very useful. Then another thing is you have to always consider how much is the optimum time of radiopharmaceutical in your body, because it should not remain for longer time also. For if it is for very short time interval, will not get the useful information. Then the type of radiation emitted by the radionuclide, and it depends on the purpose. That means whether you have to consider gamma emitting radionuclide, beta or alpha, it will depend on which type of diagnosis or therapy is done. Then very important is you have to consider not only the radioactive half-life, whenever we say half-life, it is a radioactive half-life, but at the same time, you have to also consider the biological half-life as well. Now we will see the properties of ideal diagnostic radiopharmaceuticals. First thing, they should be pure gamma emitter. Preferably, its gamma energy should lie between 100 to 250 keV. Then its effective half-life. Effective half-life is nothing but summation of 1 upon radiological half-life plus 1 upon biological half-life. So this effective half-life should be 1.5 times the test duration. That means if your test is going to be there for 4 hours, effective half-life should be 6 hours or more than that. Then another important point is high target to non-target ratio. That means the radioactivity should reach to the target organ more than the surrounding one. Then you have to always take into consideration that there should be a minimum radiation dose for the patient also, as well as the nuclear medicine personnel who are handling it. Patient safety is also very important. Then you have to also consider the chemical reactivity of the radiopharmaceutical when it is introduced, whether it is reacting with other substances in the body or what. And of course, economic point is very important. It should not be too costly also. It must be available readily. And it must have a simple preparation, and quality control is very important. Okay, some of the radiopharmaceutical traces I have listed here. There are number of them, but just to present some of them, I have given technetium-99m. This is the workhorse of the nuclear medicine. Most of the cases this is used. This is in the form of sodium pertechnetate. Some of the applications I have given are brain blood pool imaging. Then iodine-131 is in the form of sodium iodide. It is used for thyroid diagnosis and therapy. Xenon-133 is in gaseous form. It is used for pulmonary inhalation imaging and cerebral blood flow studies. Then thallium-201 in the form of thallus chloride. It is used for myocardial imaging. Gallium-67 is used as a gallium citrate and used for tumor imaging. Let us see how these are produced. They are produced in the generators. They are called as radionuclide generators. So these radionuclide generators allow to separate chemically short-lived radioactive daughter nuclei with good characteristics from the long-lived radioactive parent nuclei. Now here, especially we are talking about technetium-99m. So this method is particularly applied for the separation of this short-lived isotope having 6 hours half-life from the long-lived, because 99m molybdenum decays to give 99m technetium. This is relatively long half-life. So these two radioisotopes, they are in transient equilibrium with each other. So if we see the activity as a function of time, this is the parent is decaying. Now this your daughter, that is technetium-99m, it grows, then reaches certain value, maximum activity, and then starts decaying. So we have to extract from the generator at this particular point. You have to elute that technetium-99m. So there is a milking cow analogy is given. Cow, it's milked after a certain period of time. Similarly here, that is done. So a schematic diagram is given here for the technetium generator. So here is the column of alumina over which the molybdenum-99 is passed over, where it is decaying to give technetium-99m. So when it is passing through this 99 molybdenum, it gets adsorbed. And we have to elute the technetium-99m, and the solution is done with the sterilized saline solution. And then it is eluted. Of course, it is well shielded, everything. Okay, now let us see about the in vivo diagnosis. So in vivo means you have to put inside the human being, in vitro means outside. So let us see first about the in vivo diagnosis. So here the radiopharmaceutical is introduced in the system of a living patient. So either you can give orally, either you can give injection or by inhalation, depending on for which purpose you want. Then the gamma rays which are emitted by the radiopharmaceuticals, they are monitored to provide the desired information. For this purpose, you have to use a gamma camera, which consists of this particular sodium iodide thallium detector. In the diseased portion of the organ, it may differ from normal tissue in their tendency to take up the radiopharmaceutical. That means the normal tissue will have different absorption and diseased tissue will have different absorption. So whenever there is an increased uptake of the radiopharmaceutical, it is called as a hotspot. And when there is a reduced uptake, of course, it is as compared to the normal one, it is called as the cold spot. The example here is if you use thallium-204 for the heart scan, this damaged portion gives the cold spot, while technetium-99m, when it is used for bone cancer, it gives the hot spots. Just it is a schematic again for the gamma camera. It consists of 3 parts. There is a collimator, then the detector part, and the electronic system. So through these collimators, the gamma rays, they are passing through it. They are detected by sodium iodide thallium detector, and there is electronic system which will convert everything the form we want. Let us see the technique, in vivo technique, positron emission tomography. It is popularly known as PET, that is PET. This is mainly used for the detection of cancer. Not only that, it is also used to study the spread of cancer in the body. Then once you know how much it is spread, some radiation therapy is given. Then one can again review and evaluate the effectiveness of that radiation therapy. So in this, which radiopharmaceutical is used is FDG, popularly called as, it is fluorodeoxyglucose, wherein fluoro part is labeled with fluorine 18. And this FDG, it acts as a scanning agent. Why it acts as a scanning agent? Because it acts like glucose and it is transported into the cells and it gets trapped there. Then malignant tumors and infection have increased glycolysis, and of course there will be an increased uptake of this FDG. So in short, that was the thing about PET. Now which radioisotopes are used here? All these are positron emitters. Gallium-68, rubidium-82, 18 fluorine. It is used in more than 80% cases of all PET applications. Then one can also use nitrogen-13, 11 carbon. Okay, what happens actually in this PET? So as we have seen, this 18 fluorine is used, it gets decayed into 18 oxygen. And this decays by beta plus mode. So a proton inside this fluorine nucleus, it gets converted into neutron, positron, and a neutrino. So this positron, which is there, it gradually loses its kinetic energy during the interaction with the surrounding atoms. And this positron, it combines with the electron in the surrounding atom. And these positron and electrons, they get converted into two gamma photons, which are exactly in opposite direction at 180 degree. Okay, and one can monitor this. What is the advantage? As it is giving these two gamma rays in exactly opposite direction, one can get a three-dimensional image of the organ which we are going to study. So some of the applications are listed here. It is used for cerebral oxygen extraction and metabolism, wherein 15 oxygen needs, then cerebral blood volume, myocardial blood volume, cerebral glucose metabolism, and so on. These are various applications of PET, and these are the different radionuclides which are used. So what is done is that this is a just image which is shown. If the person is allowed to pass through this, there is a detector ring, scintillator crystal is there, then your signal goes to the computer, you can see the image here. A representative image is shown here. Let's see, that is of the brain, and this is the normal brain image, and this is the brain image wherein the person was having the schizophrenia. So you can see here. Now these are the examples. The example which I gave is the static imaging. So we'll see what is static and dynamic imaging. So in static imaging, there is a time delay between injecting the tracer and the buildup of radiation in the organ. So these were the examples of static imaging which I gave. So these are performed in the brain, bone, and lung scans. Then in case of dynamic imaging, the amount of radioactive buildup is measured over time. That is during when it is taken up. So these dynamic studies are performed on the kidneys and heart. So you can study the flow there. Let us see about the renogram, which is example of dynamic imaging. So renograms are nothing but the dynamic images of the kidneys, and why they are done? Whenever following situations are there, to assess the individual kidney or bladder function, to detect the urinary tract infection, detect and assess the obstructed kidney, detect and assess vesico-uteric reflux, and to assess the kidney transplanters. So it is done in this case is the tracer is injected into the patient. is MAC3 is the name of the kit, and wherein technetium-99m is used. So whenever it is introduced in the patient, this radioactive material is removed from the bloodstream by the kidneys. And within a few minutes of the injection, the radiation is concentrated in the kidneys. After 10 to 15 minutes, almost all of the radiation should be in the bladder. And the gamma camera takes the reading every few seconds for about 20 minutes. Now let us see how it looks like. If we take the renogram, this is the normal person's renogram, because first it reaches and then it decays, and this is for the abnormal person. You can see here, shaky graph. Let us see the application of radiopharmaceutical both in vivo and in vitro in case of thyroiditis. So all of you know that whatever iodine we take from the food is getting accumulated in the thyroid glands. And this plays a very vital role in the well-being, as it controls growth as well as metabolism. Under disease condition, in some people, the gland becomes overactive. It is called as hyperthyroiditis. In some people, gland becomes sluggish, which is a condition of hypothyroiditis. But both these conditions are unhealthy and it leads to serious consequences. And this condition, whether it is a hyper or hypo, can be detected and treated also with the help of iodine radioisotope. Now, the deficiency of iodine, it leads to goiter, as you must have seen some of the cases having this swollen thyroid glands. The excessive intake of iodine inhibits the normal function of the thyroid gland. These iodine disorders can cause several things: mental retardation, stunted growth, hair loss, and several other effects. There are several cases of goiter reported in Maharashtra. In a recent survey, it has been reported that in India, out of 324 districts surveyed, 264 have been found to be endemic for iodine deficiency disorder. And children and pregnant women, they are more susceptible to this IDD. So these are some of the things which are shown: goiter, cretinism, spontaneous abortion, stillbirth, spot defects, defects in space, squint, psychomotor defect, and loss of IQ points. So these are some of the IDD effects. Hence, it is important to diagnose it very timely, because this particular disease is a very silent killer disease. This is a very silent killer disease, and important thing is it's what you can say, some of the things which are common, we get exhausted and all, we think this is due to the hemoglobin and all. So these symptoms are similar to some other diseases. So you will not pay attention to it. But if you diagnose it timely, you can get cure of it. So many people, they are having the thyroiditis, but they are not aware of it. So in my lectures, I always make people to aware about this particular disease. Let us see how it is diagnosed. A glass of orange juice containing 10 microcurie of iodine 131 is given to the patient. So that when we introduce to the patient, it will go directly to the thyroid gland. And this counting of gamma activity emitted by a patient's thyroid is measured. It is at a distance of 20 centimeters from the thyroid. These counts are compared with the dummy thyroid. And the counts are measured after every 1 hour. The type of graph we get is like this. For normal person, it is reaching towards the thyroid gland decaying. When it is below the normal curve, it is called as hypothyroiditis. When it is above the normal curve, it is called as hyperthyroiditis. So somebody is having the hyperthyroiditis. Again, there is a solution. There is a therapy, again using the radioisotope only. A dose of 200 microcurie of iodine 131 is given, which will destroy the excess growth which causes it. Of course, if somebody is having hypothyroiditis, he or she has to take the iodine supplements. So let us see how is the in vitro diagnosis. Because something is to be, radioactivity is to be injected to the patient. Patient is always afraid, as we know. So there is other way also. One can do the in vitro diagnosis. And the technique which is used is radioimmunoassay. This radioimmunoassay, it uses an immune reaction, that is between antigen and antibody. Reaction is given here. Ag stands, which is the ligand to be measured, and Ag star is the radiolabeled ligand, and AB stands for the antibody. So we have antigen, labeled antigen, and antibody. So there is the formation of a complex AgAb. And there will be a normal one and a labeled one. There will be, of course, excess of labeled antigen as well as the antibody. So here this unbound radio-labeled antigen and Ag, that is which is not labeled, they are washed out, and the radioactivity of bound residue is measured. And the ligand concentration is inversely related to the radioactivity. So this antigen-antibody reaction is just like a lock and key. So as shown here, that the particular lock has a particular key here. So these are the radiolabeled harbours, these are unlabeled. We get the formation of an antigen-antibody complex. Excess of antigen and antibody are here. Now, how this technique is carried out? We have to take a known amount of the test sample to add the labeled antigen. Then you have to incubate it, that is allow the reaction to reach to the completion. You have to keep it as it is for few hours. Then decant and watch the contents of the well. So it will remove all the unbound antigen. Then the radioactivity which is remaining in the well is measured by a counter. You can use either GM counter or a scintillation counter. And as I mentioned, intensity of radioactivity is inversely correlated with the concentration of antigen in the test sample. So this particular technique is highly sensitive and can go to very low concentration of antigens. In case of thyroid, these antigens are nothing but the thyroid hormones. This is a standard. And unknown sample is shown here. You can see the percentage tracer bound as a function of concentration of the standard. And you can have your test sample and find out the concentration. Now we'll explain in brief the work carried out by our research group in diagnosis of this thyroiditis. As I mentioned earlier, children and pregnant women, they are more prone to the thyroiditis. So we have undertaken this work because of this, and the area which we selected is Pune city and nearby area, and some of the villages were selected. We have used the Araya kits which are supplied by BRIT. Serum samples were analyzed for these thyroid hormones. And to carry out this work, research grant was provided by BCOD SPPU and UGC UP Phase 2. 3 of my students, Neeta, Rashmi and Viju, they have worked on this project. Now, which are the 3 kits we have used? One is the BRIA-MAC 3, which is used to measure the total triiodothyronine, that is T3. This is a magnetic particle separation system. Another one is BRIA-MAC 4 or T4, which is nothing but the total thyroxine, and IRMAC9 Araya kit for human thyroid stimulating, that is TSH. So when the doctor tells you to do the thyroid test, these are the thyroid hormones which are measured. The normal range is given here. It is for this 0.7 to 2.1 nanogram per ml. For this is 55 to 135, and this is 0.17 to 4.05. So as I said, this technique is highly sensitive. You can see we can detect up to nanogram per ml. So when these values, when they are less than this, it means hypothyroiditis. If it is greater than this, it is hyperthyroiditis. Same thing here. When both these values are less than or greater than, it will tell you whether it is a hyper or hypo. But another important thyroid hormone is TSH. So there is an internal mechanism to keep these values normal. So accordingly, TSH will increase or decrease. So if these two values are coming greater than or less than, you have to always do this TSH test also. So out of 243 pregnant women, what we found is 128 were prone to hypothyroidism. And usually pregnant women are known to have this particular hypothyroidism. And out of 172 children, 65 were prone to hypothyroidism. And there were only few cases of hypothyroidism and others were not. Now let us go to the therapy part. The radiopharmaceuticals are used for therapy also. The aim of this therapy is to destroy a specific portion of a diseased tissue. The radiation source can be external or internal. And most commonly used radioisotopes are cobalt-60, iodine-125, and cesium-137. So this is called as radiotherapy. It is a technique used for the treatment of tumors, wherein the operation or surgery cannot be done. Then there are two types, teletherapy and brachytherapy. In case of teletherapy, the radiation source is away from the patient. In case of brachytherapy, you have to keep the radiation source near the organ, sometimes inside the organ also. Then what are the requirements of sources for their use in radiotherapy? First thing is, there must be solid and non-leachable matrix. It should be stable against heat and radiation. Its specific activity must be very high. Size should be small. It should be inert towards the encapsulating material because this radiation source is kept in certain encapsulating material. Its leachability should be less than 0.01%. It should be uniformly distributed throughout the source. Activity variation should be plus minus 10%. It should be easily prepared, and of course, economic viability is very important. So these are some of the commonly used radionuclides in radiotherapy. So example, let us say isotope 192 iridium. It is prepared by N-gamma reaction on iridium. It is in the form of fire. Half-life is 74 days. Energy 370 and 610 keV. Cobalt-60, which is most widely used for cancer treatment in the pellet form. It is also by N-gamma reaction, while 137 cesium is by uranium fission. Iodine-125 by decay of radioisotope itself. It is in the form of SID, having 60 days half-life. Ruthenium, palladium, and so on. So these are some of the examples which give, there are too many. So the therapy is given by irradiating the person having cancer with high energy gamma rays. So these gamma rays which are emitted by cobalt-60 source. So this cobalt-60 source is kept within a thick heavy metal container and they are having the slits, and through these narrow slits the beam of gamma rays it emerges and person gets irradiated. The brachytherapy is used to treat the cancer of uterus, cervix, prostate, intraocular skin, thyroid, bone, and eye. Now we come to the brachytherapy. So brachytherapy for retinoblastoma. So retinoblastoma is nothing but a type of an eye cancer. It is mostly attributed to the genetic character and mostly found in infants. So some of you must have watched the Oscar-nominated film Schwarz, in that it is shown that that child was having the eye cancer, and at the end it is shown that his eye was removed. But no, there is a solution, that of our radiopharmaceutical. So it should not be ignored because it may be fatal. So we must need to treat with the radiopharmaceutical. So this is the work carried out by our research group in association with the radiopharmaceutical division of BARC. I think Dr. Pillai was also there at that time. The student who worked with me is Sanjay Saxena, and these are some of the brief details of it. So this is radiation plaque was prepared for cancer treatment. So iodine-125 is prepared. We have seen that it's having a 60 days half-life, and this is the energy. So the 100 megabecquerel of this activity of 125 was adsorbed from palladium silver rod. And then it was encapsulated in tiny titanium capsules, which are of the size of 0.8 millimeter diameter and 4.75 millimeter length. As I mentioned, this work was carried out in collaboration with the radiopharmaceutical division. So this is a photograph of this plaque which we have prepared. Of course, this is the enlarged one. I already mentioned what is the size and all. So this plaque is to be kept inside the eye, so by operation. And you have to keep it for about 3-4 days there. After 3-4 days, it is removed out. And it was observed that the patient gets cured and there are no side effects. So first trial of this was done at Shankar Netralaya, Chennai, and then in the, I think, Hinduja Hospital, Mumbai. Now it is used in Coimbatore also. Now about the COVID situation, the use of radiopharmaceutical and diagnosis of COVID-19. So if you know some patients and you know that doctor first thing said that you do the CT scan. So this is the CT scan is nothing but one of the applications of nuclear medicine. So high resolution CT of the chest is the preferred technique for the screening, diagnosing and monitoring of the patient recovery from COVID-19 induced pneumonia. So this imaging technique employs multiple X-ray measurements from different angles to generate specific cross-sectional image of the body parts, and this will give you the anatomic information of the patient. So CT can identify COVID-19 related lesions and track disease progression. And sensitivity is 97.2%. This is the structure of coronavirus. Now, the imaging modalities which employ the radio tracers can also yield accurate diagnostic results because they are giving some additional information also. For instance, in January 2020, that is before the outbreak of COVID-19, this FDG was used for PAT and administered to 4 patients with respiratory symptoms and fever. So as mentioned earlier, this radio tracer is getting preferably taken up by the macrophages in this case and neutrophils in the patient which are suffering from the inflammation. So of course the lesions will have high FDG uptake and this is indicated evidence of lymph node involvement. And the characteristic radioelectrical features and metabolic activities which are associated with COVID-19 induced pneumonia are also observed in asymptomatic patients too, which are undergoing this PAT-CT. So this imaging technique offers a means of identifying the prevalence of COVID-19 among the high risk, especially the asymptomatic patients with the underlying condition. As the radiotracer uptake is dependent on non-specific inflammatory response and can provide vital information on overall immune activation. Hence, this PAT-CT can be suggested to have for COVID-19 prognosis and treatment. Similarly, the radio labeling of white blood cells has also been applied to other imaging modalities such as SPECT, that is single photon emission computed tomography, wherein these gamma emitting radionuclides are used as the imaging tracer. And the one which is used is 99M technetium hexametaxime. It is labeled leukocyte and it also revealed pulmonary infection in COVID-19 patients. So just to have a comparison between CT, PAT and SPECT, this gives the anatomic information, X-rays are used. PET, it gives physiological, metabolic, molecular, here positrons are used. In SPECT, gamma rays are used. This also gives physiological, metabolic and molecular. Now let us come to COVID-19 therapy using radiopharmaceuticals. So one of the first, all this is from my literature survey, of course. One of the first study was carried out by researchers at Emory University Hospitals. A very small group of people were treated. They selected 10 COVID patients with severe pneumonia and they were needing supplemental oxygen, whose health was visibly deteriorating, and they were treated. Their median age was 78, the range from 43 to 104. So these patients, we given a single low dose radiation, that is 1.5 gray, to both the lungs, from front and back bed. The patient was out within 10 to 15 minutes. And what was observed? Within 24 hours, 9 of the patients showed a rapid improvement in oxygenation and mental status. And of course, discharge after 12 days. and their blood tests were done, their repeated imaging was done. It was found that the radiation was safe and effective, and there were no any adverse effects. So it is nothing but the anti-inflammatory effect of radiation and not its antiviral action. It is invaluable in helping the patients with COVID-19. Similar results were observed at AIIMS facility in New Delhi also. Initially, 2 severely ill patients were given 0.7 gray dose to the lungs, and they were found to be stable and off of oxygen. Then more patients were treated. Nowadays, many countries are using this therapy for treating the COVID-19 patients. This is the representative image of COVID-19 patient. This gives the PT with 18 fluorine, this gives the CT, and this is the fuse one. So this is the publication from ACS 2021. So this is from the literature. After discussing all this, in short, now I will tell you about the probable effects observed after radiation therapy. Generally, effects are seen after second or third cycle of radiation therapy. Which are the common observation is fatigue, vomiting, hair loss. These are some of the common effects which are observed. And the probable effects after radiation therapy on some of the organs, these are on brain, fatigue, vomiting, hair loss, dry skin, headache, eyesight is getting affected. Breast therapy, fatigue, hair loss, failing skin gets affected. Chest, fatigue, hair loss, dry skin, throat ache, breathing problem. Okay, so these are some of the examples here. And again, it varies from person to person. Not all of them will show the same symptoms, but these are the symptoms which can be seen. Now, what precautions are to be taken while using the radiopharmaceutical when we are undergoing the therapy or a diagnosis? So as an example here, precautions are given while iodine-131 is used for diagnosis and therapy of thyroid. First thing, the patient who is undergoing this particular treatment or diagnostic, he should not consume food which contains iodine before few weeks of the treatment. Why? Because whatever iodine we are taking is going towards our thyroid. So results will not be clear if this is done. So we have to stop consuming food. Then consumption of radioiodine, it is decreasing the WBC. And the person should not come in contact with the patient having infectious diseases because it will again immediately getting affected because low count of WBC. He has to drink more water after taking the radioiodine dose. Person taking the treatment should avoid the contact with others. His clothes and other belongings are to be kept separate. Flush twice after using the toilet. Patient must be hospitalized unless his radiation dose becomes less than 5 millirem per hour. Floor of the patient's room must be covered with plastic or absorbing material. Similarly, other objects also to be covered. Then RSO, that is Radiation Safety Officer. It is a must to have any nuclear medicine facilities must have a RSO. So he should see that radioactivity should decrease to less than 200 dpm per 100 square centimeter before the room is allotted to the other patient. At the end, what I can say is radiopharmaceuticals can be used in diagnosis and therapy for a large number of diseases, and number of applications are still increasing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for very informative talk on radiopharmaceutical, its uses in diagnosis and medicine, along with the detailed mechanism you have told to us, and also touching upon the its use in treating COVID-19, which is now become a thrust area actually. So I seriously say thank you to you. Now the forum is open for question answer. The very
I
first.
would like to thank my guide, Professor Patil sir, former Vice Chancellor of Bharati Vidyapeeth and North Maharashtra University, who is there. I'm very glad to present in front of him. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so shall we move towards the question answer session?
Sure.
So, ma'am, very first question is by Jayappa Manjana, sir. Now, his question is that Now, radiation therapy is being considered for treating COVID patients, especially to irradiate lungs.
Yes.
So, what is your comment on this treatment?
As I already mentioned it, we are getting very, not we, the persons who are using, they are getting very positive results. And another thing is there is no any adverse effects are also observed. So it is a very positive thing, and many countries are using, even India is also using that.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you, ma'am.
please. Yeah, please go ahead with other questions, madam. Yeah, fine, fine. I'm satisfied because I wrote that question before she entered that COVID things. Because
Yes.
this morning we were watching the TV about the low dose irradiation for the COVID
Very
patients.
low dose, very
Yeah,
low.
yeah, that right, that right. Okay, thank you, thank you.
So if anybody is willing to ask questions, so we
Yeah,
welcome.
I am Chandrajudan here. I have two questions. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So one is about this development about pneumonia is very interesting, which is a common symptom of COVID.
Yes.
But the pneumonia happens due to other reasons as well.
Yes.
Has this technique has been anytime applied for such cases?
Yes, can be applied.
But not studied, I think. Is it?
Not so, because now there is a lot of things are talked about.
I have also read about this. Then second question is this microfibrillation and blood clotting is one of the problem which there are people say that it is also indirectly the cause of pneumonia by cutting off the blood supply to lungs. That also comes under the radio tracer technique. It's basically a circulatory problem. So adopting the radio tracer, we can actually diagnose.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. These two things actually I wanted to bring to your notice. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question, please?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, Dr. Rajorkar, you have spoken about the use of pharmaceuticals, radiopharmaceuticals for diagnosis. My question is, hello. Yeah, my question is related to the use of radio label isotopically standard in environmental analysis. I don't know whether you can answer this.
Elemental analysis is used in neutron activation analysis technique. I am working in that field.
No, my question is just please listen the question. My question is that we were using sometimes radioactivity labeled standards for analysis. So my question is that whether it has some effect on the person who is using. I don't know whether to answer it or not. Some of the time we were concerned they are radioactivity labeled and we are using for analyzing some of the chemicals which are at very, very short, less concentration. So some of the time we were putting those standards in our normal samples and then analyzing the amount of chemical present. So my question is whether the person who is handling this radioactivity label standard is analytical detection of some of the unknown chemicals, whether it will affect the person who is using this. That was my question.
No, one thing is that not anybody can start immediately working on this radiology. We must get our lab approved by AERB, and then only one can use it. There are certain precautions, certain designing. You have to take certain things into consideration while handling the radio. That will be another big lecture itself. But you have to take all precautions and then you can do. Then regarding you said very trace quantities and all.
Yes,
this radioisotopes, that's what I am telling you. Either one can induce the radioactivity, you can add the radioactivity into the system, or you can irradiate the system. So for the trace analysis, the isotope dilution analysis technique can be used when we are having very trace amount of species in a matrix. You can definitely do it.
No, we were regularly using. It was a standard methods when our concentration used to be very low. So we were injecting isotopically labeled standard. We were procuring and putting in the unknown samples. So I was always confused whether it will have some effect on the person who is using. This is my question. So this was already commonly used.
So what
Please,
is
sorry.
Can I answer that?
Okay, then.
Please repeat the question. Nita, will you please repeat the question?
Yeah, you see, in case of the environmental analysis, in some of the chemicals, when the concentration is very, very low, so we were using isotopically labeled standard in unknown samples because it was making easier to identify the small concentration. So my concern is always in the lab, the person who is using whether will have some effect of the radioactivity level standards when we are using. So that was a very, very small concentration.
Yeah, but we are not getting exposed to that much high activity because when you are handling it, you are using the radiation batch, KD batch, and you come to know how much activity you are getting exposed to. So it is always safe. I am handling the radioactivity for more than 35 years. Nothing happened to me.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
This is Rupa.
No, I have a comment over this. Hello, about this radioactivity. It is always preferable to get your facility certified by the concerned authorities like AERB. Otherwise, one do not know from the talk of Dr. Nidha Thakur, I understand. The exact situation she is also not able to assess. So better to go to a competent authority, get this assessed. That is the right way.
Dr. Chandrajudan, can I answer that?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, see, the radioactivity will be given to people only when they have an authorization. And for all these laboratories which are using very, very small amount of activity, it may be in sub-millicule quantities, the ARB always, when they are giving this authorization, they always know that it cannot give more radiation dose to the people who are handling it. So absolutely, there should not be any concern about it because the annual limit is something like about 20 millisievert per annum. There is a lot of echo. So the radiation dose, what the people getting using these radio tracers will be very, very minimal, and there should not be any concern. And as far as AERB is concerned, AERB will not give permission to procure radioactivity by anybody unless they know that the practice what they are doing is safe. So there should not be any concern. You know, earlier we were supplying a lot of radioimmunoassay kits. There was radioimmunoassay kits used hardly about a few microcuries of activity. They were all allowed to be handled in tabletops. But when you go to radiopharmaceuticals, the amount of activity handled is much more. So you need more sophisticated analysis, more sophisticated laboratory, better control. So AERB knows what the people are doing it. You know. So Madam's concern about anything can happen to those people who have used those radioactivity, I will say that they should not worry about it. As Nilima Madam said it also, you know, we all had been handling activity for very, very long years. I was a radioisotope person. I handled radioactivity for nearly 40 years. And as per the regulation, if you are doing it, as per the control of Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, you are doing it and you are not getting radiation dose more than what is prescribed, there should not be any concern for your health.
Thank you.
I can see Gurk sir in the audience. I would like to have his comment. Gurk sir, please. Another authority in the field of nuclear.
Hello, welcome Gurk sir. Gurk sir. Hello.
There, just now.
Just I seen also Gurk sir there.
Please unmute your mic, Gurk sir.
Gurk sir, he is a person from neutron activation analysis.
I really enjoyed.
We are happy to hear you, sir.
His mic is on.
Hello, Gurk sir.
His mic is on.
He's talking but not getting.
Madam, he left or what? I can't. I'm sorry. His mic is on. Yeah, he is here.
Only sir, we are unable to hear you. Hello, Garg sir.
Okay.
I think some problem is there. Let us move ahead. Later on, we can join.
Hello? Yeah, ma'am. I'm having a small question regarding this COVID treatment. You said that radiation therapy is one of the things which is on now. But also you said that radiation is causes a decrease in the white blood cell counts. I saw in the paper one. So if there's a decrease in the white blood cell count, they say that all these fungal infections, etc., there's a more chance of the people after COVID getting these infections, especially this black fungus and all what is coming up. So how have they really seen any?
Actually, now this dose, how much dose is to be given? It has to be targeted to the particular organ. It is not only the oncologist or only the physicist, but physicists, radiant chemists, oncologists, the operator who is there, all of them to come together and decide the optimum dose. In the first, the first slide is show risk to benefit ratio is always important. Okay, so that is to be adjusted. You can't say this much growth is to be given and that person will get cured. No. It is to be adjusted by after the diagnosis.
That's a very interesting lecture. Thank you so much. Very informative. Hello. I'm a small Farina. Hello.
Yes, yes, you can ask the question.
You are not audible. Voice is not clear.
Your voice is breaking, please.
Ma'am, your voice is not clear.
The radio pharmaceutical labs, where they are present.
Ma'am, can you please type your question in chat box?
You can write in the chat box. Minal will tell me what you are saying.
Yes, ma'am.
Minal, ask another question.
Yeah, sir, in chat box we don't have any question, but
Okay,
if
okay,
anybody is having doubt, then they can ask.
I am Sesharao. Madam, I would like to first congratulate. I would like to substantiate what you said and Dr. Pillai. I am an exploration geologist. I have worked in Atomic Minerals Directorate for Exploration Research for more than 36 years. So we used to come across with the number of radiations in the sense that what are the samples which we are handling. So what I mean to say is the minimum dose for which a human body can be sustained, there is no harm and we have not got any problem of any sort of thing throughout our, either in our laboratories or the persons who have been engaged in doing the work. Especially going for mining and all, there we used to have the patches. So the ventilation is there. So whatever the radon has been there, it used to go out and the batch it used to take the remaining radiation. So health wise there was no problem. This is the thing I just wanted to add for me. Thank you very much for the excellent lecture and the insights which you have given. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, we have one question. The question is, given radiotherapy that we have given to asymptomatic COVID-19 patient, can virus be muted if not destroyed the RNA?
Actually, it is gamma radiation are not destroying the virus, but it is the anti-inflammatory action which is taking place. It is getting cured. And for the symptomatic patients, first the diagnosis is done, and then if required, then therapy. Not all of them are given therapy.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is from Mrutyunjay Karmakar, sir. And the question is, what is the effect of gamma radiation on SARS-CoV-2?
As I said just now, it is not causing any destruction of the molecule, but it is the anti-inflammatory action of gamma rays which is helping. Same answer.
Madam, as I have seen just now, it says that some TCIT lethal dose of, I'll just tell you, some kilogray. This helps the, it says the TCID 50 assay of the irradiated specimen preliminary study demonstrated that SARS-CoV-2 was inactivated by gamma radiation at the 10 kg dose. This confirmed the complete inactivation of SARS-CoV-2 at this dose.
But that particular dose was very high. 10 kilograms is very high.
Yes.
You cannot give such a high dose to the patient.
Obviously, yes. Just like UVC cannot be injected inside the gut of the person. It can kill outside.
Yeah.
So gamma radiation can be effectively utilized for disinfection of the hospitals, operation theaters.
This gamma radiation. I think there is some work going on. Hello.
Yes.
Reuse of this PP is used. But in that case, they use a high dose of radiation
for sterilizing.
Sterilizing. In fact, there are sterilizing plants operating at different places using gamma radiation.
So, which one is supposed to be more? I am working on UVC. I made some instrument using UVC technology. So, which is more effective, UVC or gamma radiation?
I am not competent to compare, but I know gamma ray definitely is used for sterilization. There are plants working on medical sterilization.
Yes.
And currently, with respect to COVID, there is also this PP are being sterilized using gamma rays.
The gamma radiation facility is not that available everywhere as UVC is.
There are places in BRC it is operating and other places.
And moreover, I would like to comment on this one where you were saying that radiations don't damage. I think Dr. Amarnath Garg, when he was teaching us nuclear chemistry, he also mentioned that low dose of radiation actually increases the longevity of the person.
That is radiation pharmacies. There are different theories. In certain conditions, it happens, but normally it is ionizing radiations. It has got both benefit and as well as damages. At low doses, normally it doesn't affect the safety point of view. From the safety point of view.
Thank you.
Next question is there. Minal, just read
Yes,
it.
sir. The next question is what P. Radhika ma'am, she is trying to ask that where are the radiopharmaceutical labs available in India?
Okay, the radiopharmaceutical labs, as I mentioned, there are 349 nuclear medicine centers which are approved by AERB. So almost each of the big cities, they are having this radiopharmaceutical lab. Actually, the radionuclide generator, which I have shown in one of the slides, these are available at these hospitals and they get that required technetium-99m from that. Again, AERB approval is needed for all these things.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks.
Thank you for solving all the questions and queries related with radiopharmaceuticals. Now moving towards citation certificate segment.
Just a minute. Hello,
yes.
just a minute. First of all, Dr. Rajulkar ma'am, I'm very much thankful to you for the nice lecture and you have very well explained it. And now I have a little query. Just nowadays we are talking of that mucormycin, that fungus. So black fungus and all that.
Yeah.
So whether then can be treated by gamma radiations?
I don't know. Now the studies will start now once it is happening.
Yeah.
I did not come across any study on this. Sorry.
No, it's perfectly okay. Okay. And I just wanted to substantiate this Dr. Sheshara's reasoning, why we are not affected by radiations and all that. While although we have been working since say almost 35, 36 and 40 years, something like that. Just because so far as our work, when we are talking of iridium and thorium, their half-life is very high. It is almost 4.5 billion years. So because of that, the radioactivity, radiations decomposed, that is relatively very, very less. And that's why we are not affected that much. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Madam, one small question. What is the cost of producing a gamma ray radiation facility? The lowest cost.
Gamma ray radiation facility means what you mean to say?
If
It
there
is
is an instrument.
purpose or for irradiation purpose and all this.
For irradiation purpose.
No, simple irradiation in labs. So
Yes.
about it is this 60 to 70 lakhs.
My God. Okay, thank you.
I hope there are no questions.
No, I have got one question.
Yes, sir.
That is, this recently DRDO has made one deoxyglucose for COVID therapy.
Yeah.
Has it come out of the F18 deoxy or anything related to the cancer treatment with F18 deoxyglucose? Or that only has triggered this development? Or
Actually, that FDG, it acts as a scanning agent. So it undergoes this glycolysis, it takes part, and there will be more amount is taken up. There will be hotspots, as I mentioned, more absorption is there, the hotspots, and we can see that where these lesions are developed. This is mainly for diagnostic purpose, not therapy.
Madam, can I answer that?
Yes, sir, sure.
Yeah, the question is about the new medicine which had come from DRDO. That is the deoxyglucose. So this has definitely something to do with the FDG, that is fluorodeoxyglucose. Both work in the same fashion because, when we take the glucose in our body, when we are consuming glucose, glucose is taken up by the cells by the glucose transportase enzyme. Then there is another enzyme which is called hexokinase. Then the hexokinase enzyme converts this to phosphatase. Phosphate derivative is done. Then our glucose, the normal glucose, will undergo several more metabolic process, and it will be going into energy. Whereas when you are going to give the deoxyglucose, this deoxyglucose will be taken very similar to that of the glucose for the first two steps, and subsequent to that it will not be recognized by the cells. Now here what happens is that the COVID affected cells will take up this medicine, and subsequent to that they will not get the energy to propagate. So the viral load will come down and the oxygen dependent will come down. So this is one of the earlier this deoxyglucose was used for as a supplement treatment for cancer in 2016. This was proposed, and DRDO has proposed this for reducing the viral load in the case of COVID. So this is I hear that it is working. This is more like a supplement, and it is not killing the virus. It will allow. It will not allow the virus to rapidly multiply, because that particular cell where the information the virus is taking, it will not be getting it. It will not get the energy for further growth actually. So that is why this medicine might be good and effective. Is it clear?
Next, Minal.
Yes, sir. Any questions? If anybody is having any question, we can have. If no questions are there, so can we move to our next segment?
Yes, yes.
Sir, so now I actually wish to thank Pillai sir for explaining very nicely that new medicine which is launched by DRDO, and we'll be moving towards the citation certificate segment. For this, I would like to invite Dr. Sanjogta Meshram, Professor in charge B first year RCOEM Nagpur, for a citation of Certificate of Excellence. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, Minal madam. A very good evening to all. It gives me an immense pleasure to be a part of ISAS Nagpur chapter. It is indeed a proud privilege for me to cite the Certificate of Excellence. Indian Society of Analytical Scientists, ISAS headquarters, and ISAS Nagpur chapter, along with Chemistry Department, Sri Ramdev Baba College of Engineering and Management, Nagpur, in recognition of the outstanding research, is happy to confer this Certificate of Excellence on Dr. Mrs. Nilima Rajurkar. She delivered an insightful talk on radiopharmaceutical for diagnosis and therapy on May 29, 2021, during which she shared her immense insight, great expertise, and enriched knowledge about the role of radiopharmaceutical in COVID, cancer treatment, and various horizons of medicinal chemistry. The talk in this national webinar synergized immensely with the objectives of ISAS in promoting excellence and relevance. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Sanjita, ma'am. Now I would like to invite our chief guest, Dr. M.R.A. Pillai, sir, for virtual handing off of certificate. So
Thank
please.
you, Minal. Before virtually handing over the certificate, let me give a few words about the wonderful lecture what Madam Professor Nilima Rajurkar has given. She has really taken us through the entire history of radiopharmaceuticals, radiation therapy. She started with the discovery of Roentgen rays, radioactivity, and she finished it with the latest use of low amount of radiation for treating the inflammatory aspect of COVID. This was a very nice and very informative talk as given by an excellent academic professor. Thank you, Dr. Nilima, for this. I'm also happy that you have mentioned the name of my colleague, Mr. Sanjay Saxena. He did you mentioned the wonderful work of making those plaques what he had made with iodine 125 under your guidance. That was a very nice and very useful work which the department was always proud of. And I also saw our very senior respected professor Dr. Amarnath Garg sir in the audience. I don't know whether he is still there, so it was a great pleasure for me to see him. So with this few words, it is my pleasure to hand over the Certificate of Excellence to Professor Nilima Rajurkar with great pleasure.
Thank you very much, sir.
Viewers, madam.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Now moving towards the end of our session, it cannot be get completed without a vote of thanks. So I would like to invite Dr. Mrityunjay Karmakar, sir, HOD, SFS College, Nagpur, for vote of thanks.
Yeah, thank you, madam. let me mention at the outset that I'm not a doctor. And secondly, regarding this webinar, I have only to mention one word, that it was excellent. And I'm Mrityunjay Karmakar. I am working as an associate professor in HOD chemistry in SFS St. Francis de Sales College, Nagpur. So at this outset, I take this privilege and I feel proud to convey my thanks on behalf of all the participants. I convey my thanks to Dr. Meenal Joshi, Assistant Professor, Ramdev Baba College of Engineering and Management, Nagpur, for comparing this program. I thank Dr. Avinash Bharti, Chairman of ISAS Nagpur chapter, for giving the welcome address. I also thank Dr. Raghav Sharan, Vice President of ISAS Headquarters, for taking active interest in promoting ISAS activities in Nagpur. I remember meeting him long back when he said that he's ready to, launch this in a big way, and I think he's on his path. So I think there is he has left no stone unturned to do a wonderful work for the propagation of scientific temper in this region. I'm also thankful to Dr. Rajiv Raghavan, Chairman, for his Chairman Welcome Committee, for his address. I'm also thankful to Dr. Chandrachudan, President ISAS, for his presidential address. I also thank Dr. M.R.A. Pillai for being the chief guest, the former head Radio Analytic Division, Bhabha Atomic Research Center of our country. Dr. Marur Raghavan Ambikal Majan Pillai for his grand presence and for his necessary guidance. I also thank Dr. Himani Pendurnekar, Assistant Professor, Sindhu Mahavidyalaya, for introduction of the chief guest. Then I convey my thanks to the most coveted resource person, Dr. Mrs. Nilima Rajurkar, former Professor and Head Chemistry Department from Savitribai Phule University, Pune, for her enlightening lecture and moreover her discourse related to the COVID, the present pandemic situation in our country. It was wonderful listening to you, ma'am. I also thank our dear Dr. Tangde, the Assistant Professor, PGTD Department of Chemistry, Nagpur, for introduction of the resource person. And then I thank Dr. Meenal Joshi for coordinating the question answer session from Ramdev Baba College of Engineering and Management, Nagpur. And also for the citation of the Certificate of Excellence, Dr. Sanjugita Meshram, Professor and in charge of BE first year, RCM, Nagpur University. Then I also thank again the chief guest of our today's function, Dr. M.R.A. Pillai, Dr. Marur Raghavan Ambikal Majan Pillai, for virtual handing the certificate to Dr. Nilima Rajurkar. And on behalf of the participants, now I take the other side. On behalf of being a member of ISAS, I thank all the participants for this program who have taken active interest and through their questionnaires, through their active interest in the academic activities, and which will certainly lead to the progress of our nation. I as a person has been benefited through this lecture, and I also feel I can see some of the names. Now every name cannot be taken. I was specifically enlightened by the wonderful smile of Dr. Shesh Rao Ralapalli when when I mentioned 40-50 lakhs, he gave a wonderful laugh sitting there. So I think these small moments are certainly to be remembered for always, and the smile coming on the face of Dr. Raghav Sharan, they all motivate us and take us towards and also with Prajanam Brahmanam. I excuse myself if I am not able to read your name properly. And Dr. Surya Narayana Varanasi and everybody near Neeta Thakkar, Vijay Lakshmi Adya, those who Rajiv Raghavan, Yamuna Singh, Dr. A.V. Varti is of course there, Meenal Joshi and Amol Pillai, and everybody whom I am able to see on this platform. Dr. Ramamurthy for his wonderful questioning. So thank you very much, all of you. I also take this opportunity to thank anybody who has not been mentioned here. So thank you very much, all of you. Stay home, stay safe, do well. Let us work together like this for the development of our country. Thank you very much.
You too, Karmakar. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Professor Karmakar, I am Chandrachudan, that Patnanam Brahmam is Chandrachudan, President ISAS. So,
I see, but your name.
on behalf of ISAS, I am thanking you for a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, yes, yes. Wonderful.
And I have been all the time watching that beautiful guitar behind you.
Oh, yes, yes. Actually,
So beautiful your Thanksgiving also.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm a musician. I keep singing also at times. You know, because the UGC has said that we have to take care of the mental health of the people. So I have this hobby of, I don't play much, but I'm a singer. You can watch me on my channel, Highway of Life. I've got a
Sure,
channel
sure.
on YouTube. Well, you will find me doing all useless activities. And, you know, kind of singing.
I would like to bring out one more thing.
Yeah.
Because if you are so keen on a center there, there are provisions in the Department of Atomic Energy under Collaborative Research Program. If you make a proper program and approach the Board of Research in Nuclear Science, probably you can initiate some collaborative R&D. And there is a possibility. Please work out along with some scientists in BIRC.
Yes, sir.
The 70-80 lakhs is not a big amount, provided you work out a good program. I was in the Board of Research in Nuclear Science, so I know working. There is a clear possibility. So work out a good program, R&D program, and submit. You can incrementally, if not the first stage itself, incrementally you can have a good center.
Actually, recently we have applied for one GM counter, a small instrument, and we got the application forwarded. It is in the process. Yes.
No, that is a small thing. You can also have a INCAS. You can talk to Dr. Adia is there. INCAS actually conducts periodically at different educational institutions. They conduct seminars on radioactivity, and along with that event, there will be all the detectors, etc. They leave it as a gift to the institution, free of cost. Yeah. Dr. Adia is there. She will be able to elaborate more.
1-to-1